Welcome Wildcats. Today we're going to be starting Unit 2 for your notes. And Unit 2 is all about how absolute value functions are graphed. Now the nice part about this is we've already done several examples of it, so even though it's technically a new unit, you should have a good idea as to what we're doing. So let's take a look at graphing absolute value equations. Hopefully you guys will remember this slide from the previous unit where we talked about how different areas of the equation we're going to change our function in different ways. If you need a refresher, go ahead and pause now, take another look at this, and make sure that you understand how each of these work. Alright. Hopefully you will also remember this slide from when we were talking about parent functions. Once again, if you need a brief refresher on this slide and you're not exactly positive how the absolute parent function works, go ahead, pause now, take a second look at this one. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take a look at a little bit of vocab. But before that, I'm going to change how the screen looks a little bit so you can see that last part. So let's take a look at a little bit of vocab. First of all, first piece that we need to know for absolute value equations is the vertex. The vertex is the reflection point, or where it changes from going one direction to going the other direction. So for this particular drawing, it's right there. The formula for that vertex point we call h comma k. So on a traditional one, if this is 1 over and 2 up, then our vertex point is at 1 comma 2, then this is h comma k, and we can just plug that into the equation like we have been doing. So if you have y equals a absolute value x minus h plus k, you can just plug in 1 for h and 2 for k, and you'll have that part of the equation ready to go. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line that cuts your graph in half. So in this case, it would be right here. And the formula for that vertical line is x equals h. Those are really the only two pieces of vocab that we have, vertex and axis of symmetry, but it is very important to know both of them and know the formulas for them. When we are doing our graphing though, there's a very specific order to how our transformations go. And it starts with horizontal shift, then goes to vertical stretch and compression, then vertical reflection, then vertical shift. Now, if you do happen to have a horizontal reflection, stretch, or compression, that actually does go before horizontal shift. So if you wanted to add that in there, you could call that step 0. Actually, you'd even call it step -1 would be your horizontal stretch or compression, with step 0 being your horizontal reflection. However, we do try to kind of avoid horizontal stretches and horizontal reflections to the best of our ability. Well, specifically horizontal stretch and compressions, because they are basically, as we mentioned before, the same thing as vertical reflections. So let's take a look at an example here. F of x equals -2 times the absolute value of x plus 4 plus 3. So as before, our first step will be to identify our parent function. Spoiler, for this unit, the parent function will always be the absolute value function. And we want to get to the point where every time you guys see the f of x equals absolute value of x, you think of this graph. And if you're thinking of that graph, when you see that, then you will immediately be able to do these problems much faster. So, next thing we need to identify, step 1, that horizontal shift. For this particular equation, we see a +4 on the inside. That should tell us we are shifting in what direction. Good. We are shifting 4 units to the left. The equation for that new graph is given to you there, but here's what it'll look like. Step 2, hopefully you will remember as identifying our vertical stretch. I guess at this point that's kind of step 3. Our vertical stretch in this case is what? Excellent. A factor of 2. The equation for our new graph is given there, and it will look like this green graph here on your screen. Notice that our graph is starting to get a little cluttered, but once we are done with all of our shifts and everything, we can actually get rid of all of the old graphs if we want to. So next we need to look and see whether or not we have a vertical reflection. And in this case, you have a negative sign out front, which is a vertical reflection, which means we're going over the x-axis. You see the new formula there, or the new equation, and that's what the graph looks like. Finally, we are adding 3 on the outside, which is a vertical shift, but which way are we going, guys? Awesome. Addition on the outside is up, so we're moving up 3 units, giving us the same final equation, and this is what our graph looks like. You don't have to draw each and every one of these middle graphs if you don't want to, but you can kind of see how it helped to identify where we were going and what we were doing. Basically, the entirety of 1.2 is just, unit 2.1 is just like this. However, sometimes it asks you to go the other way. They give you a picture of a graph and they ask you to identify what the formula is. So the way you're going to do that is they're going to either ask for it as y or f of x equals a absolute value x minus h plus k, or they're going to ask it for it in this form, 1 over b times, they wouldn't have an a in this case, so it would just be 1 over b x minus h plus k. They would ask for it in one of these two forms, and if you go to the YouTube video of the 2.1 homework assignment when you run into a question like this, it will tell you exactly how to solve both of these. We don't do this as often, so I'm not going to give you specific notes on it. It's also something that you've done before, so hopefully you won't have too many issues with it. As always though, Wildcats, if you need additional help with any of this, feel free to message me on Schoology or shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help you out. Again though, on 2.1, when you run into one of those problems, just go to the YouTube video for the 2.1 homework assignment, see if that helps you out. Good luck.